no matter what he has learned or been taught from generation to generation, still he carries in the innermost depths of his mind a certain fear of the darkness, a fear of the night, which is somehow associated with death, and which in actuality is the fear of death itself. Each of us in his lifetime will probably come in contact with some psychic phenomenon, either directly or indirectly through the experience of a relative or acquaintance. An experience never to be forgotten.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Paranormal Portal. I'm your host, Brent Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've got an epic show ahead, but just remember, if any of you have experiences you'd like to share, I'd love to hear from you. You can either email me at paranormalportalradio@gmail.com or head over to paranormalportal.net. Scroll down and find the button that says Interview Me, and that'll allow you to look at a calendar of possible times and dates and find a date that works for you. Love to hear your stories, so definitely get in touch with me. Hey everybody, and welcome to the show. Thank you all for being here and being a part of the journey. Tonight we're going to talk about strange phenomena on the show, and specifically we're going to zero in on this strange phenomena of places that actually disappear. People experience a place, and then when they try to go back and backtrack, the place is no longer there. This is a really strange phenomena to me, and I find it absolutely fascinating because it does seem to demonstrate that this reality that we know isn't quite what we think it is. And if it is, it's not, maybe not as concrete as we believe that it is. So we're going to dive into some stories tonight that are derived from Reddit and talk about people's alleged experiences with these strange disappearing places. So I hope you guys are ready, because this is going to be a mind bender. All right, guys. So for the sake of the show, we're going to be going through an article that was written by Samantha Dillinger, which has appeared on Ranker. And ranker.com is the website. And this is from the collection of creepy people, places, and things. And I don't know, these stories just boggle my imagination because, again, as I said in the opening, there's a nature to which we don't understand about the reality that we live in. And surprisingly, people have some pretty surreal experiences that I guess if they occurred to me, they would really make you think, wait, is this real at all? And I don't know. There's the possibility, I guess, that it's not. Of course, there are those people that believe this is somewhat of a simulation, and others believe that perhaps we're more a part of a multiverse than we think we are. I think pretty much most people would acknowledge the fact that there probably is some version of the multiverse around us and near us, but it just seems to be something that a lot of us consider is safely tucked away in its own place, and we're safely tucked in our own place. But apparently, these worlds, if that is the case, do collide. And some of these stories are probably going to make you wonder. But again, the course of the show is never to make anybody believe anything. You believe what you feel is right. Follow your own heart on this. But I love these stories because, again, it makes you wonder, just where are we? So let's dive into some of these. So the first story on our journey tonight comes from Redditor Today's Trash. And starts out, I've been an avid horsewoman my entire life. The barn I grew up riding at was in a rural area and situated on a few hundred acres of undeveloped land. I spent a lot of time out in those woods and saw a whole lot of nature happen out there. It's as close to perfect solitude as you're going to get in western New York. Well, in my late teens, I had a horse who was a pretty darn great guy, but I'd put him up for sale as I felt I was ready for a more challenging animal and could not afford to own two horses. Well, one lazy summer morning, I packed a lunch and headed out for a long meandering ride in the woods. I wasn't feeling terribly ambitious that day and intended to head to a man-made pond I knew near one of the border farms to have lunch and read for a bit before heading back. Well, about halfway there, I decided to take the alternate route that led along a pretty tree-lined ridge and turned off the main trail. I have no idea what happened when I turned off into that cutoff, but the woods we walked into were not my woods. They weren't creepy or weird or wrong, but they were different. I was immediately disoriented. Nothing looked familiar. I couldn't pick out any landmarks or trails. I was weirded out enough that I turned around to go back to the main trail, but the trail back was just gone. I couldn't have been more than 30 yards from the main trail, but for the life of me, I couldn't find it or any way back to it. We traveled back that direction for far longer than we'd been walking in, and finally gave up and just gave my horse control of the aircraft, figuring he'd find his way towards home eventually. Well, he immediately took a hard left, which should have been taking us parallel to the main trail and in the general direction of home, and 10-ish minutes later, he walked us into a clearing. It was a meadow with a perfect serene pond in the middle. The meadow was short, tidy grass like it had been mowed recently, but there were no obvious routes for any sort of mower to get in or out. The pond was weirdly clear. Most of the water in the area was very swampy, but this was clean and fresh smelling. The wildflowers around were not any that I'd seen before. I'd assumed it was some farmer's personal zen place, and I didn't think too much of it. I hopped off, let my buddy loose to graze, and ate my lunch, read for a bit, and enjoyed a gorgeous afternoon sitting there watching the dragonflies and frogs, and spending time with my horse, generally feeling peaceful and content. It was really a storybook setting, and I remember thinking how weird it was that no one from the barn had even ever mentioned this incredibly beautiful place that was so close to home. I packed up a couple of hours later and remounted, and then headed back the way we'd come in. As we left the clearing and went back into the woods, I immediately felt at home again, and I found the main trail right where my internal compass said it should be. It didn't make much sense to me that the main trail was still that distance back when we had traveled what felt like a mile in that direction, but I honestly thought I'd just been daydreaming and meandered off course when I'd turned around. We got back to the barn with no issue, and I headed home that night feeling very grateful to have had such a wonderful, peaceful afternoon with my equine friend, knowing he was going to a new home soon. The next day I mentioned the meadow and pond to the barn owner, and she looked a little confused. Her family's been there for generations, and she told me she didn't recall any such area near the barn, nor did she recall anyone else mentioning such a place. I told her she had to see it, and we tacked up and headed out. Couldn't find it. Not that day, and never since. Well, the owner shrugged me off, but I'd spent 6 hours out there somewhere, and that damn place wasn't more than 30 yards from the main trail, and near a well-used cutoff to another well-used trail. I made it my mission to find it and spent the next 2 weeks scouring the area. In the 20 years since, I have never been able to locate it. I've pored over satellite images of the area. Nothing. So far as I can tell, it doesn't exist. When we turned off the main trail that day, we went somewhere else. And the story does include a pretty fascinating epilogue, and it says, "My horse perished suddenly a couple weeks later, a day after saving my life when we were out on the trail looking for that damn impossible meadow. No joke. I have no explanation for that meadow, but I don't think I get to go back there. I know how ridiculous this sounds, but honestly, think it was his place that he was sharing it with me before he left for good. I'm not the sort of woman prone to that sort of flight of fancy, but I know what I saw and what I felt, and I know the place doesn't exist out there anymore. Wow. That's absolutely fascinating. And none of it was a bad experience. It was really beautiful and serene and peaceful, but it does seem like maybe some doorway opened, maybe due to the nature of her attachment to this horse and knowing that he was going to be leaving her. And it was just a moment they got to share. I don't know. It's a strange story, but does that mean it couldn't exist? No, I think it could and perhaps really does exist somewhere, somehow. But maybe it's not just for anybody. Maybe it's a special place that's, for whatever reason, they were gained access to that day. So it's a beautiful story, but it's also kind of sad, I guess. I don't mean to laugh that her horse died. Of course not. I mean, that's completely tragic, but it is a bit of a twist that after finding that amazing meadow and then just weeks after that, some period of time after that, it's kind of ambiguous with the way it's written, but she went out looking for it over and over and couldn't find it. And during one of their trips, the horse, and I don't know the specifics, but somehow saved her life. Something must have been going to happen or almost happened, but the horse essentially saved this person. So I don't know. It's amazing. And it's one of those curiosities that maybe we'll never know, but at least there's a story of it and we can think of the possibilities. So very cool. Well, the next story is a little shorter. And it's by a Redditor that goes by the name of _CELLI. I don't know if that's Chelly or Sally. I'm not sure how that person would pronounce it, but anyway. But the headline is, I have no idea what that gas station attendant was trying to save me from. So let's dive into it and hear what's going on. I was driving from Dallas to Tuscaloosa, left at midnight and drove straight through the night with two friends passed out sleeping. It was probably 4 a.m. and I had a quarter tank of gas, which translates to about 100 miles. Well, I saw that the nearest town was about 90 miles, so I was pretty worried about making it. Before I hit that town, I ran into a tiny town that wasn't on the map. A few houses, a gas station, a convenience store, and that was about it. I walked into the gas station and handed the guy $50 so I could fill it up. Well, need to double that today, but anyway, this must have been written a while ago. He was really tall, skinny, a black guy, like skin wrapped around bones level skinny, probably 6'5" at least. And he just had this eerie look about him. He looked at me, leaned over the counter, scanned the outside, and looked back at me. He handed me my $50 back and a hat and said, "Look, you look like a nice young fella. You don't want to be out here at this time of night looking like that. Put the hat on and get in your car quickly and get gas at the next town." Based on the way he said it and how he pointed, looking like that was about being white, I think, but I'm not positive. I was super confused and just said, "I don't have enough gas to get there. That's why I'm here. I didn't even know this place existed." And he responded, "It doesn't. There's 2 gallons left in this can. Just drive another 15 to 20 miles out and use those 2 gallons. But please, you need to move now." At that point, I stopped questioning him and just left. On my return trip, it was daytime, so I wanted to stop back in and return the can with 2 gallons in it, but wouldn't you know it, couldn't find the little town again. It's like it disappeared over the weekend. To this day, I refuse to stop in small towns that aren't on the map. I have no idea what that gas station employee was trying to save me from, but he pushed me out of there with some urgency and even gave me free gas to do so. Yikes. Again, do I know these stories are real? No. I mean, they're things that I've discovered in my journeys through the interwebs, looking at different topics and ideas to discuss. But if that's real, that's absolutely terrifying. Could there be little rogue towns out there that maybe they don't make the maps, but maybe there's a reason for that? Maybe people aren't supposed to discover them. I don't know. Again, you be the judge. The next story that we're going to read looks like from Malaysia, and it's from Redditor TDA Snowman. Sorry. I got tripped over that. Sometimes the Reddit names are pretty interesting, and it's hard to know exactly how to interpret the smash of letters and words combined. But there you have it. That was my best guess. TDA Snowman. All right. So the story begins, Cyberjaya, Malaysia. I was opening a call center, so working nights to match U.S. hours. Our typical lunch spot was closed for a few days. One guy, he said he knew a place close by. We piled in his car and off we went into the jungle. At the time, if you headed to Kuala Lumpur, it stayed pretty urban or suburban. You headed some other direction and it got dark fast. We were out on these roads where streetlights go from regular intervals to what seemed like one every 5 kilometers, and it quickly became obvious the driver was lost. He stopped looking for the place to eat and was outright just looking for a way back to the office. And then we saw this house with a counter where the car park should be, just lighting up in the jungle around it. We pulled in, mostly just for directions. Turned out this was a random mumak, or outdoor food stall, built onto somebody's house. They operated for the farms in the area and were in the process of just shutting down, but stayed open to feed us. Out in the middle of the jungle, I had some of the freshest and best Indo-Chinese food. They were even able to give us directions to get back to my office area. We tried to find that spot again like a week later, though we reversed the directions. We found nothing but trees. Oof. These kind of stories are really interesting, and it's hard to know what to think of them. Again, it's up to you to decide. Is that a factual account of something that happened, or a bout of creative writing? Could be. I'm not taking that away, but let's say, for instance, it is real, and throughout the course of the shows, doing this for several years now, I do run into stories like this where places just pop up and they're just in the right place at the right time to render some kind of aid or assistance, or just to help somebody along on their journey. But when those same people go back to try to, say thank you or, whatever in another day, those places don't exist. And I find those absolutely fascinating because it almost seems like some sort of divine intervention. Now, I don't know that these people were in any kind of danger. They were just basically turned around. And is it possible that they were so turned around that they really couldn't duplicate the directions and find that place again just because they were screwed up? Maybe. That's certainly a possibility. And human error is a real thing. But if that's real, that's really powerful. It is interesting that this was just a little home restaurant built onto a house, but the person said it was the most amazing food, and they stayed open late just to give them food and help them out. So I think it's a powerful story. And again, believe what you will, but maybe it's real. And if it is, wow, that's pretty impressive. All right, we're going to move on to the next story. And this one is by Redditor Growl Interrupted. Growl Interrupted. And the headline is, "That's where the old nuns of the school were laid to rest." It sounds plenty creepy right off the bat. It says, "I went to an all-girls Catholic school. It's a very big school, around 2,000 students, kindergarten through 12th grade. It was located on top of a mountain and surrounded by some sort of forest. When I was in second grade, around 8 years old, my friends and I liked walking around and exploring different places in school, the woods nearby, which was off limits, the pond, and other school buildings and facilities. One day, my friends and I stumbled upon an area that looked like a series of tombs. There were maybe 20 plus tombs in there, some open, some closed. We don't know how we got there, but we were curious little kids, so we went closer to see. As we got closer to the tombs, an old man holding a broom came out of nowhere and surprised us. He said he was the caretaker of the place, and that's where the old nuns of the school were laid to rest. After that, he told us we shouldn't be there and not to come back, so we left. Well, now comes the weird part. After leaving the area, my friends and I found ourselves in an unfamiliar place. Seems like we were lost. We were getting nervous, but just decided to keep walking until we found someplace familiar. We walked for like 10 minutes, and then one of us saw one of the old school buildings, which made it easy for us to get back to our classroom. Turned out we had been gone for 4 hours, and the school guards and teachers had been looking for us. As we explained to them that we just walked around and saw the tombs, the teachers and the school guards gave us weird looks and said there's no such place. Oh, that's horribly creepy. Well, there might be that place, but it might not be where you think it is. Again, I don't know. These are the odd, wonderfully weird stories that I just love. And I love that our world still has mystery like this, potentially. Again, I can't vouch for any of these stories being real. But if they are, and they're presented as such, they're presented as real stories. So I think it's profound. It's potentially incredibly profound, but I don't know. The next one is kind of short, and it's by Nemesis_of_time. Time is spelled like the spice, Thyme. And the headline is, "When I emerged, I was in a desert." Okay, and the story begins, "When I was 7, all potential credibility has just been abandoned, I'm sure. I rode my bike into a tunnel under a 2-lane road. When I emerged, I was in a desert. The path was still there. It went straight off into the desert. There were a few cactus plants, and it was hot and sunny. Well, I quickly turned around and went back through the tunnel and emerged into my own hometown park, where it was late afternoon in November with lots of West Coast trees. I looked through the tunnel and could see the other side of the park with no cactus, just normal trees." Wow. So that's just a young child's experience. And again, I know that as adults, we pretty readily dismiss kids' experiences. And I don't think that's fair. I think kids probably experience much more weirdness than we adults do. But I don't know. There may be a parental instinct kicks in, and oh no, you just imagine that. And granted, kids have incredibly powerful imaginations. They can bring pieces of plastic to life, and in the form of toys and action figures, and create worlds and universes in their minds. So there's no shortage of imagination. But does that disqualify an experience like this that allegedly this person remembers from a very early age? Sounds like a pretty big impact, but who am I to say? All right, the next one is from, I don't know, it doesn't say who, it just says a former Redditor, but The story headline is "The Cabin Was Very Dark and Strange." I grew up in the middle of nowhere. Some of my relatives lived a few minutes walk from my house up a hill, and they had woods behind their houses. I used to explore the woods all the time. I knew the paths and places well. You couldn't go too far because there was a cliff and an incredibly deep lake beyond the cliff. Anyway, one day while walking, I saw an old log cabin. I was sitting in the middle of a field, and I had been to many times before. There was a bright and sunny day. The field was lit up in gold. The cabin was very dark and strange. I felt like I shouldn't go near it because I knew it shouldn't have been there. I was very confused to suddenly see this cabin that had never existed before. Well, I left the woods and went back numerous times looking for the cabin again. Never saw it again in my life, and I do know the location I was in. I wasn't lost, and again, there were only a few places you could go back in those woods since the cliff and the lake. It's not like miles and miles of woods before you reach the cliff. That's the whole story. All of a sudden, I just got this vision of like Grimm's fairy tales or whatever, It's like, yeah, sure, the dark cabin that just appeared. That can't be good, especially for a little kid. That's that's the stuff of horror stories. But since he managed to write the tale, I guess he made it okay and didn't go back and didn't find it. Well, he went back, but he never did find it again, which I think is probably a good thing. I guess just as a rule of thumb, if dark cabins appear one day and it shouldn't be there, yeah, just turn around. Just go back home. Thanks. Okay, next up on this list of these incredible stories is from another former editor, nobody to attribute it to, but it's, I did find a sweets shop that didn't seem to exist. The story begins, I've never had anything really spooky happen to me. However, I did find a sweets shop that didn't seem to exist. In college, I ended up in the next town over. I knew almost nothing of this town. It probably sprang up in the early 40s, as most of the buildings had that sort of architecture. I was exploring the town, got a bit lost, and ended up at this sweets shop. They did cookies, cakes, and chocolates. I got a couple dozen of those little butter cookies that disintegrate when you put them in your mouth. I asked how to get back to the main road, pre-smartphone era, and thanked them and said I'd be back. Tried to find the place later, but never could. I asked others for directions, and I was told repeatedly, there's no shop like that. It must have been the best damn kept secret in that town. Or there just was no shop like that. It wasn't a secret, or if it was such a good secret, nobody else knew about it. But yeah, that's bizarre. Again, another benign story. Why? What is the significance of that? Because it sounds like an incredibly profound event. Why did it just appear for this person to stop in and have butter cookies? I don't know. It's very strange, very strange. Another one from a former Redditor went back for another ramen and it just wasn't there. Again, if only one of these stories that I'm reading you is true and the rest are just fabrications, that's incredible. But what if they're all true? What if every one of these stories is legitimate? Then you gotta kind of admit you don't really know reality. But who's to judge? I can't begin to say, but I like to keep an open mind for these things because I do believe, after having experienced many strange things in my own life, that it's not a real leap of faith to think that other people have experienced some pretty strange stuff too. But let's see what's going on with went back for another ramen and it just wasn't there. There was this ramen place that got recommended by a local on the old east side of Tokyo. We ate there together, didn't drink anything. The place's location was straightforward from the gas station. We went back there for another ramen the next night, and it just wasn't there. I circled the neighborhood, and it just wasn't there. Best ramen I've ever had to date. That's the whole story. Again, are these things happening? Sometimes I think that paranormal things happen to show us something. And while this isn't the traditional type of paranormal story, every one of these people, again, if they're true or not, you be the judge. But if every one of these people has been presented with a place that's not there, or not usually there, but was there. And in some of the stories, they had the most amazing meals, most amazing treats, most amazing cookies. But yet, it was gone. So, is that just one of those situations where it's the nature of the universe revealing itself to these people? Again, I don't know. Is that possible? Maybe. I'm saying that a lot during the show, and I apologize. I don't mean to be redundant, but this is the kind of weird stories that it's hard to know what to do with, because we're talking about things just coming out of nowhere, existing, very tangible for a period of time, and then disappearing. That to me is so profound. All right, this next one is from Redditor STHRIND. I don't know what to do with that one. So I'm just spelling it for you. I don't want to brutalize the hell out of that one. But anyway, the headline is, they said it was an insane asylum. This one's a little longer, so buckle up. When my friends and I were 12, some other friends were talking about this place they had found a few roads down from our school. Well, they said it was an insane asylum. This sounded like a total lie, but it wasn't enough to scare us a bit. Eventually, after they convinced us to go see it with them, we met after school and walked down to where it apparently was. Our school was in a suburban area and completely surrounded by houses for 1 kilometer in every direction. This place was stuck in between two homes. It had a high hedge and a small gate that split it into two. You could see the roof over the hedge. Everything was fairly well maintained, and it didn't look deserted. However, when you're 12, you can't back down if someone calls you a fraidy cat, so we had to go. Once we got inside, we found that it really was some sort of hospital. There was no one there, but the place was totally trashed. All the interior stuff had been left behind, but it looked like it had been thrown and kicked around in the rooms. Everything was broken and scratched and ripped and torn. Chairs, tables, couches, curtains, windows, those little brown medicine bottles, paper files, bent metal cabinets, etc. It was just a hospital-themed trash heap. But there were also dark brown stains along the walls. Long lines like you dragged your finger or hand, but also vague shapes like letters. And that scared the hell out of me. The place definitely felt deserted, but there was also sunlight streaming through all the windows, and nothing looked particularly old. So it had this really odd, surreal quality. The best bit was finding 2 legit white padded cells or rooms that had that tiny window in the door and the curly iron grate in front of it, just like in a movie. In that particular mess, I found a blue file filled with handwritten notes on exam pad paper. In alternating black and blue ink, it read like a nurse writing a diary about her patients. Tuesday, 16th of June. He was better today. Then there must have been about 100 filled pages, but it seemed to focus on 3 or 4 patients. At that point, we knew for sure it was some kind of institution. Not that the padded rooms didn't give that away. I decided to take the file home. At some point, someone found a piano and smashed some keys. We all just ran. We didn't stop screaming till we got back to the road. I still had the file, but realized my mom would want to know where the hell it came from. And she was a fan of grounding me for almost no reason. But I also started to get this really weird, sick feeling in my stomach whenever I held it. So I left it on the street and we went home. I still regret that, but also not really. We must have spent about 2 hours exploring that place, and there were 8 of us who all remember that day. I also still live in the area. I could go there now. The only thing is, it's not there. I get that renovations happen or property gets sold, especially with all the time in between then and now, but we never found that place again after that day. We tried to go back, but we couldn't find it. It was like it literally vanished into thin air. The hedge, the gate, everything gone. We even checked other roads in case we were on the wrong one, but nothing. And that makes no freaking sense. I mean, I imagine there's a rational explanation, but that definitely turned that afternoon into legend for all of us, and is still the creepiest experience I've ever had. Well, judging by the the nature of that place, it's probably just as well that it's disappeared. That's must be a horrifying place, but wow. Yeah, that's a tragic place as well, because sounds like whoever were there were quite tormented and to be trashed. I don't know if it was implied that it was trashed by people coming in there and just wrecking the place, or if it was trashed by some sort of paranormal phenomena. I don't know. It's anybody's guess, but yeah, that's a creepy, creepy place. I think this will be the last one we'll read for the sake of the show, but it is by Redditor Letter to a Thief. And the headline is The Ghostly Restaurant, or The Ghost Restaurant, with a Fancy Bathroom. I'm a financial auditor for a small firm in Central Texas, and we have a lot of clients along the U.S.-Mexico border towns. Anyway, first out-of-town job, and I was in Laredo, a very industrial border town. Our client offices were in an industrial park that is mainly warehouses and such. Well, we found out on Thursday that the company was taking Friday off. All office staff would be gone. It's a very small business. For a wedding of one of the owners, and the administrator who was supposed to tell us was out on medical leave. If they weren't there, we couldn't really do anything because we didn't have access to files, so we decided to stay at the hotel and leave the next morning. We'd been working long days, so my 2 coworkers and I decided to leave at 11 to sleep in. After a stressful week, being in the middle of nowhere for so long, I walked from our hotel to this little sports bar nearby. I got to feeling really good and decided to get some food and go to sleep. I called an Uber Lyft, and the guy, it's like Uber/Lyft, sorry. And the guy had to go around the highway and take a U-turn to get to the frontage road where the hotel was. He was coming up the road that led to the industrial park. Just a little way down the road, I saw a little Mexican place with the open sign, so I pointed and asked him to stop because I was very hungry. Well, he dropped me off. I tipped him on the app and went inside. It was one dude behind the counter and a few small tables. A hole-in-the-wall place. Well, I got enchiladas verdes, paid, and asked to use the restroom. The man behind the counter just pointed and smiled, which wasn't weird because that's what most people did when I spoke my English out there. I will always remember this bathroom because it was like walking into a different building. Granite countertop, one of those flat neck sinks, a spotless toilet, and it smelled like it had just been cleaned with Fabuloso. It stood out like a sore thumb in a good way. I ordered a lift and was waiting outside for like 20 minutes, and the dude was coming from far away. Right as the car was approaching me, I saw all the lights shut off at once, and I heard the door lock. I woke up in the morning, and we got on the road, and we're coming up to the same road again, where I saw the restaurant, except nothing. There was an empty concrete pad that was bigger than I remember the restaurant being, and nothing else. In the grass right next to the concrete pad was a toilet. It looked pretty new to me, but I was about 50 feet out and going 50 miles an hour, so who knows? I like to think it belonged to the ghost restaurant with the fancy bathroom. Well, maybe it did. I don't know. And again, folks, this is another one of those. Why? Doesn't really seem to have a real profound impact, but it did on this person, obviously. But just in the general sense of things, oftentimes we think, well, you know, if something divine happens or something supernatural happens, it's this incredibly profound event. And sometimes it's just a weird place that pops up. And why? Maybe it's showing them. Maybe it's demonstrating to them, these people that experience it, that our reality isn't what we think it is. That there's more twists and turns and everything may not be as nailed down and concrete as we believe it is. That maybe reality is flexible and it breathes and it changes. And I don't know what to make of that, I guess. But I kind of like that it might be that way. I think living in a world where everything is all categorized and labeled and put on its shelf with a neat container, to me just seems horrible. I like that there's mystery, that there's still wonderful, amazing things happening around us, and these are the breadcrumbs. Again, one of the themes of my show is that, you know, the paranormal is the breadcrumbs. It's not just these weird events where reality just stands on its head suddenly. It's teaching us something. And so as bizarre as some of these tales have been, maybe that's exactly what it is. It's just showing people, look, you're not where you think you are. You're not in the situation you think you're in. And there's still amazing things left to be discovered. So I don't know. Again, you be the judge, folks. I'm not here to convince anyone of anything, but this is my passion. This is my journey, and I'm so tickled that so many of you are taking it with me. So thank you so much for the love and the support, and I hope you guys enjoyed this show. Just thinking and pondering these weird occurrences that kind of on the surface, and many of them seem really benign and small, but then again, they're enormous. These are demonstrations of profound nature, and some of us are lucky enough to see them. So anyway, I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll be bringing you another episode next week. So I hope you guys will tune in then, and we'll get back into it and find out just what we'll discover. So until then, you all take care. I'll talk to you soon. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for us today. So I hope you guys enjoyed the show, and thank you again so much for all your love and support. And remember, if you want to follow the Paranormal Portal, probably the easiest way is to head over to paranormalportal.net. And that's the homepage for the Paranormal Portal. And you'll find links to all of our different social media and sites and information about the shows, including our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/paranormalportal. Or just look for Paranormal Portal on Google or whatever search engine, and you'll find links to our social media such as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. So we're kind of all over the place, and we're spreading as as well as we can. But anyway, thank you so much for the love and support. You all take care, and remember, we love you all. Be good, be kind, be nice. Take care of each other, help each other out, find the magic in every day, and remember to laugh as much as you can. Until next time.